You are in luck because joining us right now is Christa Ramey from RameyLawPC.com out of, well, it's great to see you. I see that California is having some nice weather, so if you could please send it over to Minnesota, I'd really appreciate that.
If I ducked my head, you could see out my window and probably be jealous.
I am totally jealous. I'm totally jealous. And I'm a California native. I moved to Minnesota for some reason. I have no idea why. So Christa Ramey is a trial lawyer. She's a member of the American Board of Trial Advocates. Has been nominated by Super Lawyers, Top 50 Women in Southern California, and the Daily Journal's Top Plaintiffs Attorney in California. She practices with her husband, John Ramey, who are both Texans transplanted to California. And I just sent Christa an email. I don't know if she's gotten it yet. It's like, no, wrong direction.
Anyone who's lived in North Texas and has experienced North Texas weather on a regular basis knows that I made the sound decision. Property taxes aside, it was the right decision to make.
And you're talking to a guy who moved from Southern California to Minnesota. So what the hell do I know, Christa?
Exactly. I'm not trusting your judgment on this.
I don't blame you a bit. Don't blame you a bit. All right. So Christa, want to bring you on to talk a little bit about the defamation lawsuits that Dominion Voting Systems is filing. They've already filed one against Sidney Powell, an attorney who was representing Donald Trump primarily in Georgia, and I think she also did some work in Wisconsin and Michigan as well. But then, of course, yesterday they filed a $1.3 billion defamation suit against Rudy Giuliani. I'm not sure if it's the same lawsuit and they're adding him to it, or if it's a completely separate $1.3 billion action.
It's a separate lawsuit.
It's a separate lawsuit. Okay. So a lot of people are quizzically looking at this. I am not one of them, but there are a lot of people who are quizzically looking at this, wondering if this is if defamation is a suit that Dominion can actually win, if Giuliani is covered by some sort of litigant privilege because he was representing Donald Trump when he was making the statements that are allegedly defamatory. And I thought I'd turn to somebody who's got some experience in these matters. Christa, why don't you lay out for us what defamation law is, the purpose of it, and where it applies in this case?
So the defamation, generally speaking, comes in two forms: slander or libel. One's a spoken word and one's a written word. And I think a little bit of both happened here with Rudy. Mm-hmm. Bringing in Dominion and very dubious claims that Dominion was somehow owned by a shell company, Venezuelan shell company, and had ties to their dead dictator, Chavez, and that it actually was designed to flip the Trump votes to Biden. And this was a dubious claim that was made over and over and over again. And many judges gave Mr. Giuliani and Ms. Powell and others the opportunity to put these claims in lawsuits, in legal pleadings. Now, in federal court, when an attorney like myself puts a filing into a case, whether it's a pleading or a declaration or anything else, I'm asserting that I have good faith belief that that information is true. And if it's not, then I could be in trouble. And I will note that those Dominion claims did not make it into a single lawsuit. My initial instinct when I read the complaint was that, I don't like lawyers getting sued for representing their clients,
right,
regardless of who their clients are. We have to be able to do our jobs. And sometimes that means going in front of a mic and fleshing out facts that we don't have all the information on yet, right?
Right.
And so I immediately thought, well, Giuliani's going to be protected by the litigation privilege here, because that's what he was doing. But when you kind of do a deeper dive into it, it looks more like that this was a business venture for Rudy Giuliani that had nothing to do with the practice of law. When you look at his podcast, for instance, he's advertising all sorts of products on it. He's making money talking about Dominion. Add Rudy in the code box to get your discount. None of these claims made it into lawsuits, and none of these claims were involved with discussing any lawsuits. They were only being discussed in manners to gin up people and get them excited, which kind of culminated in January 6th when he brought it up again at that rally that fired up people even more.
Right.
And so I am beginning to back off my initial instinct that would be protected by litigation privilege. Now,
I sensed that. I did sense that, so yes.
But now I also wonder, and I think a lot of us, I'll confess, I'm a former Republican. I think a lot of us, whether they were former Republicans or just grown folks during 9/11, we have a complicated relationship with the mayor, right?
Right.
And I, really don't like what I've seen recently, and I feel like that there might be something with his mental health. If he believes these claims to be true, and they're as far-fetched as they sound, he might have other defenses to defamation, because you have to have intent to defame. And so if he believes these claims to be true, that Dominion was switching the votes, then I don't know that Rudy had the necessary intent.
Are you saying that he has a insanity defense?
No.
No, well, because I've said all along that the guy's crazy, okay? And so is his other partner who was sued. They both belong in an institution because they're saying too many crazy things.
And Chris, I should have introduced you to my co-host, Jeff Dunitz from lidblog.com, raises a point that I've actually kind of said about Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, is that they might actually have an insanity defense. They might truly believe this stuff, whereas Giuliani's actions or lack of action in court sort of indicates that he didn't actually take it seriously enough to bring it in and test the waters there.
No, and if you look at the pleadings that he brought along the way during the litigation that kind of followed the election, and even the papers that were filed before, it was some of the sloppiest legal work I've ever seen. When you're working under that kind of pressure, your grammar's not going to be perfect.
Right.
There's going to be some mistakes in the pleadings from time to time, but it was cut and paste jobs that were just getting refiled in other cases, and judges pointed it out. I don't know that Rudy believed any of this. To Jeff's point, I don't know whether or not he's crazy. I'm certainly not a psychologist. I'm a Texan, so he is crazy. but I think that he does have, I think that Dominion will have a hard time potentially making the element of a defamation claim that Rudy had the requisite intent to defame, whether it be intentional or negligent intent.
Interesting. And this is the reason why, we want to talk to, Christa Ramey from RameyLawPC.com, is to get these nuances. The issue, I think that Rudy's going to have more than Sidney Powell might, is I think actually some of these claims did make it into Sidney Powell's filings. I think if you look at, there were mentions of Dominion voting systems and Venezuelan stuff. Some of that stuff actually did make it into court. The courts threw that out. And so the litigant privilege here might apply to Sidney Powell. The stuff that Rudy was directly working, and let me explain a little bit further or clarify. Powell did not work directly for the Trump campaign, which is what Rudy was doing. Powell was sort of on her own and kind of sort of allied and then not allied. They kind of distanced themselves from her, but she continued to pursue these on her own. Mm-hmm. The stuff that Giuliani was doing didn't include those elements. And that, I think, is what Dominion is going to argue, and it has argued in the pleading itself, has argued that shows that he knew that it wasn't supportable, went ahead and did it anyway. The January 6th rally is, I think, a particular point to this, which is that they had already informed him of their intent to file a legal action, asked him to hold all the records relating to these claims that he'd made. When he got up and repeated all these things at the January 6th rally, does that, in a defamation case, that kind of sequence of events, does that make you more likely to be found to have acted with, I want to be careful about the term actual malice, because it doesn't necessarily mean what people think it means, but certainly with reckless disregard to the truth.
Well, I think that it does, and Ed, and I think it does because of the context in which it was brought up at the rally. It wasn't brought up that I'm going to be filing this lawsuit in 10 days. It was like, wait till you see all the crap I'm about to release. You know, I mean,
Right.
it was kind of more like a bragging thing. And, you know, he'd been saying things like that for weeks and never released anything that showed any Dominion votes. And they were all hand counted. So, you know, it just, his logic kind of belied what actually was happening.
Right.
I will note also that Fox News kind of caught on to some of this early on and was certain hosts were parroting what Giuliani was saying and kind of excited about it. But, you know, I think that they have some smarter lawyers that worked for them and said, kind of back off, guys. And so they did back off their claims about Dominion. And so you don't really see Dominion discussed much on Fox News now, and that might have saved Fox from being included in one of these lawsuits.
So there's a request from our chat room from one of our great chat guys, Severe Cruz Conservative, who wants to talk about what the legal standard for defamation is. Defamation is not opinion, right? If I say, well, I think Dominion voting system sucks, that's not defamation. That's simply my opinion. And I'm perfectly allowed to express my opinion, regardless of whether or not it's justified. Dominion voting systems might be great, and if I say it sucks, I'm just wrong. Defamation involves something more than that. It's a deliberate misrepresentation of facts that tend to damage a person, right? I mean, that's sort of where we're going when we're talking about defamation.
Yeah, it's basically stating a lie and asserting that it is true. Is what defamation is. It's not just stating a lie and asserting it's true. Because if you believe it's true, to my earlier point about Rudy, if he's crazy and believes this stuff, then they might have a defense. You have to know that it's a lie. So I know that it's a lie that so-and-so cheated on so-and-so's with their, someone else's husband. And I publish that in a newspaper, take out an ad and publish it. Well, I've then now committed what is known as libel.
Right.
I did something that I know to be false. And it doesn't matter what your intent is. It could be, criminal, certainly, but most defamation falls in the civil context.
Is there an exclusion for politicians?
So, kind of. There is what's known as a public figure exception to defamation laws. Go back in your mind into the 1990s when there was a bomber in Atlanta, the Olympics. You might remember that. Richard Jewell, there was a recent movie made out about it.
Yeah, very good movie.
One of the interesting kind of areas of law that kind of came out of that defamation claim that was made by Richard Jewell later was that he was a public figure. And if you're a public figure, you're putting yourself out there into the world, and you have to expect that some of it might come back to you. So can you lie about a celebrity and get away with it? Potentially. There's definitely exceptions to that. But if it's, the National Enquirer propagating, kind of dubiously sourced information about a celebrity, I don't think that they're going to get in trouble.
But I'm thinking it the other way. Can a politician commit defamation without it being charged?
No.
I think the only exception to that might be the speech clause in Congress, right?
On the floor of Congress, there's a speech debate clause, correct, but not in this context.
Right. Once you are outside, once you're off the floor and you're making this on, Fox News or CBS or NBC or any of these things, that the speech and debate clause no longer applies. So you no longer have that kind of immunity. Which brings us to another question from our chat room and it relates to the one that Jeff just asked. What about media figures? people who are on television. And again, Rudy Giuliani kind of qualifies for this. You mentioned the fact that he has a podcast. He's a commercial media figure, does better than I do at this, monetarily speaking, anyway. And
monetarily speaking.
Monetarily speaking, anyway.
His moral compass might be a little skewed.
Or maybe he's just extremely confused. But either way, is it tougher to hold media figures liable for defamation, or is it actually easier to do that because it's maybe a little bit easier to establish the damage that might be done?
Well, I think that you've got a couple of things in play. When I talked about Fox News a minute ago, Tucker Carlson is saying these things on his show. He's got producers, associate producers, executive producers. He's got lawyers that can look out and find out all of this information for him and check his sources. So in some respects, I think that media figures are held to a higher standard. On the flip side, Section 230, which it seems like this law from the Communications Decency Act keeps coming up all of the time.
Right, yeah.
Section 230 would protect people that are online on online platforms, like, let's say you're doing a Facebook Live, you're on a social media platform. Then you are protected because there's immunities involved with social media platforms. And folks like me think that we need to do away with that. But right now, if you're on the TV, you can be sued for defamation. But if you're putting it on your blog post, and your network could be too.
Right.
Not just you, Fox. That's why these claims have stopped on air.
Right.
Or they'll say the allegations, they've changed the way that they talk about them. Right. And smartly so. So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Well, it does. And it does lead to another question, because all these things lead to another question. So, I mean, you point out that, I just want to clarify that Section 230 means you can't hold the platform liable, but you can hold the speaker, him or herself, liable for defamation. So I just want to clarify that. But the other question is about damages, right? I mean, it's about standing. How do you establish damages in a defamation case like this? This is the type of thing where damages might not be readily apparent. Certainly Dominion has had to spend extra money on security. We already know that. They've talked about that. That actually is in the pleadings, the amount of money that has been spent on protecting their employees. A lot of this is speculative damage, how much damage this is going to do to their business, what the damage is going to be in the future. And then, of course, there's always punitive damages. But you have to establish that you've actually been damaged first, and or do you? Or is just simply the defamation enough to succeed in a lawsuit like this?
You always have to show your damages. It's always an element of a crime or an element of a tort in this instance. And reputation is one of those damages, for sure. There's two types of really three types of damages. There's special damages, which are the economic losses that are suffered by the corporation. And then there's the non-economic damages, which are the loss of reputation, loss of goodwill, that sort of thing. And you'd have to have expert witnesses come in. And there's ways that businesses measure loss of goodwill when you're talking about the dissolution of a law partnership, for instance. You have to pay out your former partner the goodwill that he created as a part of that. And so you have people that specialize in how to help a jury put a number on it. But ultimately, it's the jury who decides what these are worth. You can put whatever you want in your pleading. And in most cases, you cannot get more than that. In California, I make sure that I plead, as to whatever the law will allow, instead of saying a specific dollar amount, because then you're not held to it. Because sometimes I know lawyers, you change the way you view about what you're going to ask a jury for, sometimes during closing arguments.
Oh, wow. Right? Okay.
So you look at those, they're like, oh, they're not going to give me very much money, or they are on my side, and I know I need to ask for what I believe is fair, and it's bigger than what I thought before. So you know, for Dominion, you know, it's a big number. And, you know, sometimes you hear, you know, there's no such thing as bad press. I don't know that Dominion's got a lot of good press out of this, but
Right.
I've never heard of them before this. So this might have helped their reputation in some respect when you learn what the kind of verification procedures are actually involved in using their machines for voting. I don't know.
So, Chris, I mean, the one, I guess, positive defense for somebody who's being sued for defamation is to prove that the allegations are true, right? I don't think, and I think that that is, at least for the moment, what Rudy Giuliani is saying. I want to demystify the discovery process just a little bit here with what time we have remaining, because this is the response that you get when this happens, and this is the response that Rudy Giuliani actually gave yesterday, which was that, oh, they're suing me. This is great. Now I can complete my investigation because I get to do discovery. Tell us a little bit about discovery and how that's going to work in this particular case.
Well, I always begin with telling people what discovery is. Have you ever watched My Cousin Vinny?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
Because there's a great scene in that movie where Marissa Tomei basically tells off Vinny. It's disclosure. He has to give it to you. So in federal court, which this lawsuit is, discovery is mandatory. You have to do it within a certain period of time. You have to turn over in written form all of the information you have, and then you're entitled to take what's called depositions. So you're required to show your hand. You can't hide anything, and if you do, you can't then later use it as you to say you can't use it as a sword and a shield. You have to give it to the other side, you have opportunities to provide supplemental discovery if you find out more information. And Rudy will have an opportunity to ask them for specific information that they might not have thought to include in their initial disclosures. And then everybody can take what's called a deposition. I don't know that Rudy Giuliani wants to be sworn under oath, subject to the penalties of perjury, and be deposed by what I am sure are very good lawyers hired by Dominion. So be careful what you wish for, because it does go both ways.
The fact that he didn't know and has to ask, does that hurt him also?
Yes and no. I think that just to a layperson, yes, that sounds really damaging. But you have, I file lawsuits where I have basic information about the facts of the case. I might have a police report or an incident report from a school, where a kid was abused. And then I speak to the parents, and they've got some emails. And that might be all I have, but that might paint a picture enough where I have a reasonable good faith belief that my client was bullied at school. So then I will file a lawsuit, and then I will begin to conduct discovery to find out more information about my claim and flesh out the facts and either fill it out and make it a better claim, or sometimes, God forbid, I realize the school did everything right, and my claim is not as strong as I think it is. So the fact that he doesn't have all the information is not really that surprising. I'd be surprised if he has any information, I guess.
That's what I mean. He has no information. It's not that he has a background. He at least to me, it seems like he made all of this up. Well, him and Sidney Powell.
Yeah. That's my impression. That's my impression. In which case, this does not help him, because now he's going to be subject to Rule 11, which I spoke to earlier. And everything that he files in court, he has to have a good faith belief that he is presenting factual evidence to the court, or an argument sounded in law, or a good faith argument for a change in existing law. If he's not doing that, then he's violating Rule 11 and subject to very serious sanctions.
And this is the point, I think, that we can kind of close the loop on this, right? Because if he had that kind of good faith belief in this information, he would have submitted this, he himself, in the actions that he himself brought on behalf of Donald Trump, would have submitted this to court in the form of lawsuits. And he clearly didn't want to do that. In fact, in at least one case in Pennsylvania, he clearly stated that we are not going to allege fraud. We're not going to talk about fraud. that to me is a tip-off that when it gets to depositions, this thing he might be looking for the exits at that point, because if he was really that confident, he would have already put this in under Rule 11, under the good faith.
Except he'll probably spell deposition wrong, because that's what.
No, that was Sidney. That was Sidney Powell. That was Sidney Powell. I'm sorry, Christa. Go ahead.
But and you're right. And this might provide him with a graceful exit to work out some sort of deal for a waiver of costs for Dominion to drop the lawsuit, and he'll shut the hell up. But I don't. And that's why I don't think Dominion loses at all in this case, because either they're going to proceed with litigation and it will go into this rabbit hole that Rudy Giuliani cannot get out of, or he'll exit stage left quietly, work out a deal with Dominion, and it will be confidential. We'll never know what the terms of it are, and we'll be left to speculate. But it will probably be dismiss your lawsuit and waive your cost, and let's put a confidentiality agreement on this, and I'll walk away.
Well, I kind of see that as being the end strategy here as well. That certainly. That's not what happened with American Thinker. I mean, American Thinker's I like American Thinker. It's a fine conservative website. They've done some really great work over there, but they did kind of go all in on the Dominion voting system claims, and they ended up having to settle with Dominion, not on the basis of confidentiality, but they ended up having to put up a complete retraction and apology to Dominion as a result of this. So I'm kind of curious as to whether or not Dominion is even going to go for that type of a exit, or if they're going to force Giuliani, Powell, Linwood, as they pick these people off. And there's more coming. I mean, I think we can foresee maybe Donald Trump being sued, some of the other people around the campaign being sued as well. Do you see this as the type of thing that's really going to go away quietly? I don't really foresee that.
I think that it would do Republicans a lot of good if Giuliani was made to apologize and retract. I think so, yeah. I think it would help. It would also do Democrats a lot of good in that regard. For those of us that missed the days of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, I think that we can't keep going at this rate where we're just setting everything on fire in our paths.
Yep.
So I think that is in everybody's best interest, for lies to be called lies. And if you do it, to apologize for it, just like your mom told you to do.
Well, Christa, I think that's a great way to wrap this up. I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I hope we get a chance to get you back.
Thank you.
I don't think
learned so much.
I learned a lot too, and I don't think that we're at the end of all of these stories. So if we get a chance, we'll get you back on, talk about this a little bit more sometime down the road when circumstances arise, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. Thanks. It's so nice to meet you, Ed and Jeff.
Thank you so much, Christa. Christa Ramey, don't forget to check out RameyLawPC.com. That's where you can find all the work that her and her husband, John, are doing in California. Thanks again, Christa.
Thank you. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. All right, Jeff.